At exactly 3:17 in the morning, the incense snapped in half. The sound was soft, almost delicate, yet it cut through the mountain temple like a blade. For a moment, nothing moved. The wooden walls stood still, the night air pressed tightly against the shutters, and the silence that followed felt deliberate, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Master Qin Yun did not reach for the incense. He did not speak. In more than 40 years of Taoist ritual practice, he had never seen such a sign. Incense burns down. It bends. It crumbles into ash. It does not break cleanly, not without force. The candle flames began to tremble. They leaned toward the east, stretching unnaturally, as though responding to something unseen that had entered the space. Qin Yun's eyes widened. His breathing slowed. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. His soul is trapped. The name he referred to was Yu Menglong. For months, that name had refused to rest. Online discussions surged and vanished without warning. Video clips disappeared. Accounts that once spoke openly fell silent. Witnesses withdrew. Every explanation seemed incomplete. Some called it coincidence. Others blamed pressure, exhaustion, or chance. The arguments never settled, because no answer ever stayed long enough to be examined. According to Master Qin Yun, coincidence does not exist. He had refused every request for interviews. He had declined money, attention, and speculation. Silence, in Taoist practice, is often protection. But silence has limits. On the night he performed a ritual deliberately removed from modern Taoist manuals, Qin Yun claimed he saw something that forced him to speak. "If I do not say this now," he later explained, "the truth will never cross over." In Taoism, a red thread represents fate, the unseen connection that guides a life along its intended path. During meditation, Qin Yun reported seeing another thread wrapped tightly around Yu Menglong's spiritual imprint. This thread was darker, heavier. It was not tied by destiny. It was knotted by force. To a Taoist practitioner, that distinction matters. It suggests interference. Not illness. Not accident. Not randomness. Interruption. What followed, Qin Yun warned, should not be treated as spectacle. It was not a ghost story, nor an accusation. It was an explanation of imbalance. In Taoist belief, when a life ends under unresolved pressure, the soul does not always move forward. Sometimes it circles. Sometimes it waits. And sometimes it calls without speaking. As rumors continued to multiply, Qin Yun made a rare decision. He agreed to describe what he witnessed, not to assign blame, but to clarify something more unsettling. Yu Menglong, he said, was not asking to be remembered. He was asking to be acknowledged. But behind the glamour, the speculation, and the excuses, what mechanisms are really driving this crisis? We will analyze every detail, from the initial disturbances to the irreversible consequences, to see how silence, pressure, and expectation shape not only public narratives, but the unseen boundaries between life, death, and rest. If this story resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel so that our future investigations can continue to illuminate the truths that often remain hidden behind the entertainment industry's brightest lights. Share this video across every platform where voices gather, because collective awareness is the only force capable of demanding accountability. Let us stand together, not in anger, but in clarity and compassion, to ensure that what happened to Yu Menglong is never repeated. Let us raise our voices so that silence can no longer swallow the struggles of those who give so much of themselves to the world. In Taoist doctrine, not every death leaves the same trace. Some pass quietly, dissolving into what practitioners call the gate of returning light. Others do not. They hesitate. They circle. They linger at the edges of awareness, not because they are lost, but because something essential remains unresolved. Master Qin Yun explained that when a death is not aligned with the natural flow of a life, Taoist observers look for three ancient indicators. These are not symbols meant to frighten, but signals meant to warn. The first sign is simple in description and disturbing in implication. The soul cannot find the gate. A balanced soul, Qin Yun said, recognizes its departure. It moves forward without confusion. But an unsettled soul wanders. It repeats the same internal questions. It remains unaware that the moment has passed. According to the Master, Yu Menglong's spiritual imprint showed this exact pattern. During observation, the soul did not move forward. It circled, returning again and again to the same point, as if waiting for a signal that never arrived. The second sign involves energy that does not disperse. In Taoist belief, strong, unresolved energy can ripple outward, affecting the living world in subtle but consistent ways. Sudden electronic failures. Repeating dreams shared by strangers. The sensation of being watched without presence. Mirrors and reflections carrying unfamiliar expressions. Qin Yun stated that what disturbed him most was not a single report, but the similarity across many. Fans from different regions described identical dreams without prior discussion. Narrow enclosed spaces. Flickering light. A feeling of waiting under pressure. No dialogue. No threat. Just the weight of anticipation. To the Master, this was not imagination. It was resonance. The third sign is the most misunderstood. It is called the echoing name. When a name resurfaces repeatedly across platforms, cultures, and languages without deliberate coordination, Taoists believe the soul is calling for acknowledgement. Not remembrance. Not fame. Justice does not always mean exposure. Sometimes it means recognition of imbalance. Qin Yun emphasized that Yu Menglong's name did not fade naturally. It resisted closure. At the center of these signs was one image that returned again and again during deep trance. An elevator. The Master described it with precision. The doors closed. The light flickered. The elevator stopped between floors. Inside stood Yu Menglong, silent, pressing the same button repeatedly. The doors did not open. Qin Yun insisted this was not a memory or a metaphor. In Taoist understanding, the final emotional state at the moment before death can imprint itself onto the soul. Fear leaves echoes. But what Qin Yun saw was not panic. It was hesitation. Stillness under pressure. A pause stretched too long. He warned that some online groups had attempted spirit-calling rituals driven by curiosity or grief. Qin Yun issued a direct warning. Do not summon him. When a soul is unstable, summoning does not bring clarity. It creates backlash, illness, long-lasting nightmares, disorientation that can follow the living for years. Peace, he said, cannot be forced. The most unsettling claim followed soon after. During ritual observation, Qin Yun reported seeing the jade life seal cracked. In Taoist lore, this symbol represents the continuity of a life path. It does not fracture easily. When it does, it indicates something severed prematurely, or a vow broken under force. Qin Yun did not say what vow. He did not assign responsibility. He only stated that something had been promised and something else had been taken instead. What emerged next was the concept he called the circle of silence. Individuals connected to a disrupted soul, Qin Yun explained, often experience sudden fear of speaking. They withdraw. They disappear from public view. Silence appears protective, but over time it becomes weight. According to him, silence does not erase pressure. It compresses it. This understanding reframed the narrative entirely. The question was no longer how Yu Menglong died. It became how long the pressure had been accumulating before the moment arrived. Qin Yun described the spiritual presence he observed as compressed, as if expectations, obligations, and unspoken demands had been placed upon it layer by layer. This was not sudden despair. This was accumulation. Before the ritual fully began, Qin Yun noticed the incense smoke refused to rise straight. It bent inward, forming a closed circle. In Taoism, this indicates one thing only. The soul is already surrounded. Surrounded by what? The interviewer asked. Qin Yun paused before answering. Not spirits, he said. Intentions. What do you think about this? Comment amen below so we can continue with the unfinished stories. When the story crossed from ritual space into public awareness, it did not arrive quietly. It spread in fragments. A clip appeared and vanished within hours. A comment thread surged, then locked. Screenshots circulated without context. Accounts that once spoke confidently stopped posting altogether. To outside observers, it looked chaotic. To Master Qin Yun, it looked familiar. In Taoist theory, when a soul carries unresolved pressure, the disturbance does not move in straight lines. It radiates. It finds the weakest points first. The Master described this phase as the circle of silence. Silence, he warned, is often mistaken for protection. In reality, it behaves like compression. Individuals connected to a disrupted soul, whether through proximity, responsibility, or shared expectation, begin to withdraw. Speech feels dangerous. Visibility feels risky. People disappear not because they are guilty, but because fear becomes heavier than expression. According to Qin Yun, this pattern emerged quickly. Former associates retreated from public view. Conversations ended abruptly. Invitations were declined without explanation. The absence itself became the signal. Silence, he said, is not neutral. It is weight. As the online speculation intensified, several unsettling symbols appeared within the ritual space. The first involved the jade life seal. In Taoist lore, jade represents continuity. It absorbs intention. It stabilizes life paths. During ritual observation, Qin Yun claimed the seal cracked. Not shattered, but fractured with a dark vein running through its surface. This phenomenon, he explained, occurs only when a life path is severed prematurely, or when a vow is broken under force. He refused to clarify what vow had been involved. The second symbol was more disturbing. A former associate, according to Qin Yun, attempted a Taoist mirror test. The ritual required placing a candle between two mirrors at midnight, creating an infinite reflection. It is not meant to summon spirits. It is designed to reveal imbalance. What they reportedly saw ended the attempt immediately. The reflection blinked. The person did not. Qin Yun did not elaborate further. He did not need to. In Taoist tradition, reflections are extensions of internal state. When they behave independently, it indicates distortion between awareness and reality. The associate abandoned the ritual at once and never attempted it again. As fear intensified, Qin Yun observed another sign. The ash from a final incense offering formed a shape no one present could ignore. A broken gate. In Taoism, gates represent transition. A broken gate does not block entry. It prevents exit. At this point, Qin Yun disclosed the existence of a ritual deliberately removed from modern Taoist teaching. Its name was whispered only once. The returning shadow method. Unlike common spirit guiding practices meant to comfort the dead, this method does something far more dangerous. It does not call a spirit forward. It forces the final emotional imprint to replay. The practitioner does not summon the soul. They step into its last moment. Taoist elders banned the ritual centuries ago for a reason. If the death involved fear, coercion, or unresolved pressure, the ritual could trap the living inside that emotional state. The cost was not symbolic. It was physical, psychological, and permanent. Qin Yun hesitated for months. He stated that he refused to perform the ritual until Yu Menglong's spiritual signature would not stop appearing during meditation. When he finally began preparation, something went wrong immediately. The incense smoke refused to rise. Instead, it bent inward, curling into a closed circle. In Taoist interpretation, this indicates only one condition. The soul is already surrounded. Surrounded by what? The interviewer asked. Qin Yun answered carefully. Not spirits, he said. Intentions. At exactly 2:44 in the morning, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. There was no wind. No open doors. The candles dimmed as though oxygen itself had thinned. Qin Yun reported feeling pressure on his chest, as if standing beneath invisible weight. This sensation, he explained, occurs when a ritual intersects with a forced emotional state. What he saw next convinced him the narrative had been misunderstood. There was no violence, no blood, no chaos. He saw hesitation. Yu Menglong stood still, surrounded by urgency that had no voice. Messages unheard. Expectations unspoken. Pressure without direction. Qin Yun described it as a moment stretched too long, waiting for something to stop. Nothing did. The ritual was meant to last one incense cycle. Qin Yun stopped it halfway. Why? Because he felt resistance. Not from the soul. From elsewhere. In Taoist theory, resistance during such a ritual indicates external influence strong enough to echo beyond death. That realization marked the moment the story shifted. This was no longer a mystery about how someone died. It became a question of how much weight had been placed upon them long before the end. The moment the ritual was interrupted, the boundary began to thin. Qin Yun sensed it before any physical sign appeared. The air felt heavier, denser, as if something unfinished had been disturbed without being resolved. In Taoist practice, an interrupted ritual is not neutral. It creates tension between states, a suspended condition where neither silence nor release is possible. That night, Qin Yun buried the cracked jade offering bowl before sunrise. The dark vein running through its surface had deepened, spreading like roots. In Taoist understanding, this phenomenon has a name: shadow imprint. It means the ritual touched something not meant to be exposed. Sleep did not bring rest. Qin Yun dreamed of elder Taoist masters standing in a circle, their faces calm but disappointed. There was no anger, only warning. Some truths, they reminded him, demand patience, not worrisome. When Qin Yun awoke, he understood that the story had entered its most dangerous phase. Yu Menglong, he concluded, was not trapped by death. He was trapped by interruption. Soon after, the signs extended beyond the temple. Messages began arriving in Qin Yun's private inbox. The first came at exactly 4:06 in the morning. A stranger wrote only one sentence. I dreamed of an elevator that would not open. Within 3 days, more messages followed. Different cities. Different ages. Different languages. Yet the dreams were nearly identical. Narrow, enclosed spaces. Flickering light. A sense of waiting under unspoken pressure. A presence that felt familiar but never spoke. Qin Yun described this phenomenon as resonance. In Taoist belief, resonance occurs when unresolved energy echoes into the collective subconscious. It does not haunt. It seeks acknowledgement. The master noted something critical. None of the dreamers had attempted rituals. None had studied Taoism. None had publicly discussed the case. And yet the emotional weight they described was the same. It felt like someone was waiting for help, one wrote. But I did not know how to ask. This, Qin Yun said, is the most dangerous spiritual state. Not disturbance, but suppression. At dawn one morning, Qin Yun noticed something missing from the temple wall. A symbol carved into the stone for more than a century had vanished. There were no signs of damage, no residue, only absence. The gate of still water. In Taoist tradition, this gate represents the final threshold before spiritual release. Its disappearance meant only one thing. The gate refused to open. That evening, an elderly Taoist elder arrived without warning. His face was pale. His first words were measured. "You should not have gone that far." The elder revealed something Qin Yun had never been told. Yu Menglong's soul, he said, had been marked long before death. Not by fate, but by expectation. In Taoist metaphysics, expectation can become a binding force. When responsibility, identity demands, and fear of disappointing others accumulate without release, they anchor the soul even after the body stops. When the body ends, the elder said, the weight does not always fall away. Qin Yun attempted to write Yu Menglong's name on ritual paper. Each time, the ink bled uncontrollably. This phenomenon is known as name resistance. It indicates a disrupted life narrative, a story that refuses simplification. Soon after, Qin Yun withdrew completely. Why? Because he began having the dreams as well. He saw Yu Menglong standing behind a closed gate. Not knocking. Not calling. Just waiting. In Taoism, when the mediator begins to dream the same dream, the boundary has thinned too far. Then something changed. In the final dream, Yu Menglong spoke. Only 3 words. "I did not." The sentence never finished. That was when Qin Yun understood. This was not about death. It was about being stopped mid-sentence. At 1:12 in the morning, the temple bells rang. All 6 of them. Each bell required human force. That night, there was no wind. In Taoist belief, bells ringing without cause mean only one thing. The boundary has opened on its own. Qin Yun retrieved the jade bowl he had buried. The shadow imprint had spread, forming the unmistakable shape of a broken gate. Time, the elder warned, was running out. Unresolved souls exist within a window of echo. If truth reaches them within that window, release remains possible. If not, the echo becomes the story. At 2:59 in the morning, Qin Yun lit the incense. "If silence is the price of comfort," he said, "then comfort is not mercy." He completed the ritual. What he saw was not darkness, not fear, not violence. He saw stillness. Yu Menglong stood at the gate, not trapped, but paused. Behind him stretched countless threads. Expectations, obligations, unspoken demands. They were heavier than chains. Then Yu Menglong looked up and smiled. Not in relief. In understanding. "I did not get to rest," he said. The gate of still water reappeared. The jade bowl split cleanly and turned clear. The pressure lifted. That, the elder confirmed, meant release. After that night, Qin Yun resigned from ritual practice. He returned all offerings. He taught only one lesson: silence with awareness. What followed the completed ritual did not look like an ending. There were no dramatic signs, no public announcements, no final answers delivered with certainty. Instead, something quieter happened, and that quietness was precisely the point. The shared dreams began to fade. Messages slowed, then stopped altogether. Online searches declined without effort. Discussions that once felt urgent lost their momentum. People did not decide to move on. They simply did. In Taoist understanding, this is how release appears. Not as spectacle, but as relief. Those who once dreamed of enclosed spaces began dreaming of openness instead. Long bridges, empty fields, morning light moving through mist. Many did not connect these changes to any story. They only noticed that the weight they had been carrying no longer pressed as heavily on their chest. This, Qin Yun explained later, is not forgetting. It is completion. The gate of still water remained visible for a time, then gradually faded back into the stone wall as if it had never been carved at all. When a gate is no longer needed, Taoist elders teach, it becomes a path. Qin Yun never documented the ritual. He left no written record, no manual, no explanation to preserve. Written truth, he believed, becomes fixed. Some truths must remain flexible, or they turn into prisons. Instead, he planted a tree beside the temple gate. No plaque, no name, no dedication, just a tree. People rested beneath it without knowing why they felt drawn there. Over time, its shade widened. After withdrawing from ritual practice, Qin Yun did something unexpected. He listened. Villagers came to the mountain not to ask about spirits or fate, but to speak about pressure, about exhaustion, about the fear of disappointing others. Qin Yun never interrupted. He asked only one question. When did you last feel allowed to stop? Many could not answer. That silence, he believed, was the real work. Before fully retreating from teaching, Qin Yun left behind a single instruction for his remaining disciples. It contained no rituals and no beliefs to defend. If someone grows quiet, ask why. Years passed. New stories replaced old ones. New mysteries captured attention. Yu Menglong's name no longer surfaced on its own. Not because it was suppressed, but because it no longer needed repetition. In Taoism, a story ends not when it is explained, but when it stops asking to be told. The elders later agreed quietly that the balance had corrected itself. Not because of ritual alone, not because of understanding alone, but because listening had finally outweighed noise. Some visitors still asked for a final explanation. The elders always responded the same way. A final explanation is a form of control. Peace does not require certainty. Over time, something subtle shifted beyond the mountain. People became slower to praise exhaustion, slower to glorify sacrifice, slower to confuse silence with strength. There were no headlines announcing this change. That was how Taoists knew it was real. One spring morning, the tree by the gate bloomed earlier than expected. Out of season. Without explanation. Qin Yun noticed, smiled faintly, and said nothing. Not everything that blooms is a sign, he once said. Some things bloom because the weight is gone. This was never a story about dying. It was a story about not being allowed to rest. And perhaps the quiet question it leaves behind is not spiritual at all, but human. How many people carry invisible weight simply because no one ever told them they were allowed to stop?